No one moves to Hollow Creek by choice. You either die there, or you stay long enough to forget why you wanted to leave. The town sat like a wound beneath the West Virginian hills, tucked between dense woods that never seemed to end, and a river that hadn't run clean since the 1950s. Most of the old buildings still stood, the post office, the diner, the boarded-up church, just enough to remind people that Hollow Creek used to be alive. Used to be. The story begins in early October, when the fog arrived 3 weeks early and never left. It started like any other dying fall in Hollow Creek. Gray skies, yellowed cornfields, and that silence that presses against your skull like a secret someone's dying to tell you. Most of the younger folks had long left for better lives. What remained were the ones with nowhere to go, and those who wouldn't leave no matter what. Among the latter was Evelyn Carr, 38, the town's unofficial librarian and former schoolteacher. She'd returned to care for her mother 3 years ago after a stroke left the old woman barely able to speak. Evelyn had always planned to leave again, but Hollow Creek, like it did with everyone, had other ideas. One evening, as Evelyn was locking up the tiny library, really just the top floor of the old bank building, she noticed a boy standing alone by the well in the center of town. He looked no older than 12, barefoot, pale, and staring into the empty stone mouth as though listening. She glanced around. No other kids in sight. "Hey there," she called, keeping her voice soft. "Careful. Are you lost?" The boy didn't answer, didn't move. "Do you know where your parents are?" she asked, stepping closer. That's when he turned around, and Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. There was something wrong with his face. Not his features exactly, but his expression. It was too still. His eyes didn't reflect any light. They were dull, hollow. Then he smiled and disappeared. Evelyn didn't tell anyone about the boy. Not that night, not the next morning. In Hollow Creek, you learn quickly what's better left unsaid, especially when what you saw couldn't possibly be real. But the image stayed with her. The boy's blank face. That smile. The way he vanished like smoke. By Sunday, the fog had thickened. It clung to the town like a living thing, creeping under doors and soaking into the walls. The weather reports called it seasonal inversion. Evelyn called it wrong. At the diner, the regulars, old men with lungs full of coal dust, whispered of the year the fog didn't leave. Back in '74, a dozen people vanished in a single week. Sheriff called it a cult, blamed the woods. But some said it started with a boy by the well. Evelyn's hands trembled around her coffee cup. That night, she went digging. The town's records were a mess. Water damaged, yellowed, misfiled, but she found a name. Walter Gray, age 12, disappeared October 6, 1974. Last seen, standing near the town well. Her stomach twisted. Same day of the month. Same age, same place, same look in his eyes. She shut the file, but the room had already gone cold. The next morning, Evelyn drove to Reverend Tully's church, though she hadn't been there in years. The place had been closed down after the fire, but she knew Tully still lived in the rectory behind it, clinging to whatever faith Hollow Creek hadn't burned out of him yet. He looked older than she remembered, hunched, hollow-eyed, trembling. Hands, but when she mentioned the boy, his face went still. "You saw him," he said. She nodded. "I buried his father," Tully whispered. "Back when people still got buried, right? Walter Gray vanished during that week, but some of us think he never really left." Evelyn swallowed hard. Why would he come back? Tully's eyes turned distant. Sometimes places remember things. Sometimes people don't die the way they should. And sometimes the ground keeps secrets better than the grave. He looked up, voice shaking. "If you saw the boy, you need to stay away from that well." Of course, she didn't listen. No one in Hollow Creek ever really listened. If they had, maybe the town wouldn't be what it was now, a place built on quiet screams and forgotten graves. 3 nights later, Evelyn returned to the well. The fog was so thick it swallowed her flashlight beam whole. Trees loomed like twisted statues. Every step echoed like she was walking through a vast, empty cathedral. The well sat at the center of it all, old and crumbling, covered in ivy. It had been sealed in '75, but the rusted iron grate was loose now, like something had pushed from the inside. Evelyn knelt down, holding the flashlight above the opening. The beam dropped into blackness. Then she heard it. A whisper. Not one voice. Dozens. Layered. Moaning. Crying. Pleading. She leaned closer, unable to stop herself. That's when something touched her. Cold fingers brushing her wrist. She screamed and stumbled back, falling hard against the dirt. Her flashlight rolled into the grass. When she scrambled for it and looked again, the well was closed. The grate untouched, but she knew what she'd felt, what she'd heard. And from that moment on, the dreams began. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them, faces pressed against the glass of her windows. Pale children, hollow eyes, lips moving in silence. The fog outside pulsed, alive, creeping against the wood like fingers searching for cracks. When she finally did sleep, the dream came. She was underground, surrounded by roots and earth, her arms pinned to her sides. The whispering was deafening. Above her, a circle of pale faces stared down, unmoving. One of them, Walter, opened his mouth and a voice that wasn't his filled her mind. We were buried wrong. She woke up screaming, and in her room the fog was already inside. By morning, Evelyn knew she had to leave. Pack a bag, get in the car, and drive until Hollow Creek was just a story again. She rushed through the house, throwing clothes into a suitcase, grabbing her mother's meds, her old pistol. That's when the phone rang. Landline. She hadn't heard it in years. Slowly, she picked it up. Hello? A silence. Then, you opened the gate. Click. Evelyn dropped the phone. Her hands shook violently now. Before she could move, a knock came at the door. She looked through the peephole. A boy, standing on the porch, barefoot, pale, smiling. She didn't open the door, just backed away, heart thundering in her chest. The boy stood motionless, staring. After 10 minutes, he vanished. Evelyn didn't ask how. She didn't care. She just ran, into her car, engine screaming to life, tires spinning against the gravel as she tore down the road out of Hollow Creek. But 20 minutes later, she passed the town sign again. Welcome to Hollow Creek. She slammed the brakes. This was impossible. She hadn't turned once. Hadn't circled. But here she was, right back where she started. The fog was waiting for her. It wrapped around the trees, like gauze soaked in blood. Shapes moved within it, slow, hunched, crawling. Something whispered her name. Not Evelyn. Ev-V. She drove again. 40 minutes. 60. But it didn't matter. She was caught. Evelyn returned to the library. She didn't know what else to do. Whatever was happening, whatever the well had unleashed, it had to be in the records, in the land, in the bones. In the old archives, she found what she wasn't supposed to, a sealed report from 1975. Sheriff's notes, Reverend Tully's witness statement, even handwritten letters from the miners, those who'd dug too deep in the 1950s and struck an unmarked burial site beneath the hills. Native ground, unmapped, unsettled. The letters spoke of a cavern lined with bones, walls etched with symbols older than the language they spoke. After the first man went mad and killed his entire crew, the shaft was sealed. Except someone, decades later, built a well directly over it. A well that whispered. A gate. The next night, Evelyn returned to Reverend Tully. She didn't knock, she just walked in. His house smelled of dust and mold, the wallpaper peeling in long curls. He sat in his armchair like he hadn't moved in days, eyes sunken, clutching a rusted crucifix in both hands. "They're awake now," he rasped. "You know that, don't you?" Evelyn nodded. "What are they?" Tully laughed, a dry, hopeless sound. They were children. Now, their memory. Rot. Rage. She dropped, the miner's letters in his lap. "They built the well over their grave." "Worse," Tully whispered. "They built a town on top of it." He looked at her, tears in his eyes. "We all live on a grave." Evelyn leaned in. "How do we end it?" He didn't answer, just stared at the wall behind her. When she turned, she saw why. A face was pressing through the wallpaper. Skin like wax. Mouth wide open in a silent scream. And from the corners of the room, the fog began to seep through the walls. Evelyn ran. She didn't remember leaving Tully's house, didn't remember grabbing the shovel or the lantern, but somehow she was standing at the well again. Alone, surrounded by voices. She yanked the grate aside and climbed down into the darkness. Ladder was rusted, the air damp and warm, breathing against her skin. Below, the shaft widened into a chamber, just like the miners had described. Bones lined the walls. Some still had scraps of children's clothes clinging to them. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, black with age, etched in symbols, that pulsed beneath the lantern light. Evelyn approached, hands trembling, then she heard them. Footsteps, behind her. She turned and saw the children, at least a dozen, pale, hollow-eyed. Walter stood at their front. "They buried us without names," he said. "We remember, and now, you do too." She raised the lantern. The light flickered. The children didn't move. "If you want it to end," Walter said, "give us your name." She stepped back. "What does that mean?" But they didn't answer. Instead, Walter opened his mouth, and Evelyn's voice came out. "My name is Evelyn Carr. Born in Hollow Creek. I returned. I belong." She dropped the lantern. Darkness swallowed her whole. The children surged forward, not with violence, but silence. Cold hands brushed against her skin. They moved around her, behind her, through her, and Evelyn remembered. Flashes of fire. A mother, screaming. The miners, the altar, the well. A deal made long ago. One life for peace. Every 50 years. She was the offering. Just like Walter was once. And now it was time again. But Evelyn wasn't going to die quiet. She pulled the pistol from her belt, firing into the shadows. The bullets didn't matter. The children didn't bleed. They only watched. And Walter smiled again. "You opened the gate, then everything went black." They found her body 3 days later. No wounds, no bruises, just gone. Empty. Eyes wide open, mouth smiling. Sheriff called it a seizure. Tully disappeared soon after. And the fog, it never left Hollow Creek. People still vanish, 1 or 2 a year, always in October, always near the well. The town forgets. Because forgetting is safer. But sometimes if you're alone at night walking past the square, you might hear a child's voice whisper your name. And if you turn toward the fog, you might see a woman with hollow eyes smiling.